Welcome to The Explainer. So, have you ever made a choice that, when you look back, makes absolutely zero logical sense? Yeah, you're not alone. Today, we're going to dive into the really fascinating world of behavioral economics to figure out the very human reasons we all misbehave.
Our story actually starts in a pretty unexpected place, a university classroom. It's just a professor and a bunch of really unhappy students. But this simple little puzzle, it unlocks this deep truth about how all of our minds work.
Now, you'd think a 72 would be okay, right? It's a passing grade. But these students, they absolutely hated it. They thought the exam was way too hard and morale was just in the gutter.
So the professor's stuck. He has to keep his academic standards high, but he can't have a classroom full of miserable students. So what does he do? He decides to change their perspective, not the test itself.
For the next exam, he made the total score 137 points. And this number was not random at all. It was actually kind of genius. First, it meant the average score would probably be up in the 90s, which just feels good. And second, 137. It's a weird number. It's really hard to figure out the percentage in your head on the fly.
And just like that, everything changed. The mood in the room totally flipped. Even though their final grades were completely unaffected, getting a 96 or maybe even breaking 100, well, it made them feel like geniuses. He never got another complaint.
And this gets to the heart of the matter, doesn't it? Logically, a 72% is better than a 70%, but we aren't always logical. This is exactly what the economist Richard Thaler calls misbehaving, and it throws a real wrench in traditional economic theory.
To really understand why this is misbehavior, we first need to meet this strange creature that all of classical economics was built around.
For years and years, economic models were filled with this fictional species called Homo economicus, or econs for short. These beings are perfect. They're basically walking supercomputers that always make the optimal choice to get the best possible outcome. They never get greedy, they never get scared, they just calculate.
The quote says it all. Think Mr. Spock from Star Trek. All logic, no passion. The problem, of course, is that you and I, we aren't econs. We are humans. We live in a messy, emotional world, and our models of how people behave need to reflect that. So let's really dig into this. Let's look at a few real-world examples that show just how different we are from those perfectly rational econs.
So you've got econs on one side. They're the ideal of pure logic and consistency. And then there's us, humans. We're influenced by our feelings, we're biased by what happened yesterday, and we are wildly inconsistent. And you know what? That's what makes us so interesting.
Okay, check this out. It's a real story about an economics professor. Now, an econ would look at this and say, drinking a bottle you own that's worth $100 is the exact same thing as selling it for $100. The opportunity cost is identical. But for this very smart human professor, it just feels completely different.
And there's a name for this. It's called the endowment effect. The idea is simple. The second you own something, its value just skyrockets in your mind. For our professor, the pain of losing a bottle by selling it feels way worse than the pleasure he'd get from gaining $100.
All right, here's another puzzle for you. An econ would look at both of these situations and see the exact same choice. Is the fun of the game worth the risk of driving in a blizzard right now? Where the tickets came from is ancient history. It's irrelevant. But for us humans, oh, it feels very, very different. This is a classic. It's called the sunk cost fallacy. It's that nagging voice in your head that says, I've already spent the money, I have to go to get my money's worth. Even if going is a dangerous, terrible idea in the present moment. We just can't seem to ignore the past.
So all these predictable mistakes show that we're not econs. So what are we? Well, that very question led to a revolution in economics started by two psychologists, Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky.
And their big idea, the one that really changed everything, is called prospect theory. And it argues that our happiness isn't based on our total level of wealth or success. No, it's based on whether we feel like we are gaining or losing right now relative to where we started. And this theory is built on a few really powerful ideas. Loss aversion. That's why losing the bottle of wine feels so bad. Reference points. That's why getting a 96 feels better than a 72, even when it's a lower percentage. And framing, well, framing is how it all gets put into practice.
This is just a perfect example of framing. A surcharge feels like a penalty, feels like they're taking something away from you, and because of loss aversion, we hate that. But a discount? Hey,
That feels like a reward. It's a gain. The final price is exactly the same, but our emotional reaction is night and day.
And this is where things get really powerful. Because once we accept that we're all these predictably irrational humans, we can start designing systems and products that work with our quirks, not against them, to help us make better choices.
Thaler calls this nudging. The key here is that it's not about forcing anyone to do anything. It's about being a clever designer. It's about making the better choice the easier choice for people who think like humans.
And probably the most famous example of a nudge is, well, it's also maybe the funniest. At the airport in Amsterdam, they had a bit of a messy problem in the men's rooms, and they wanted to solve it without putting up a bunch of annoying signs.
So what did they do? The solution was genius. They just etched a tiny little picture of a fly inside each urinal. And that's it. It gave people a target, a little game to play. It's a simple, subconscious nudge that works with human nature, and it slashed the cleaning bill.
At the end of the day, we're all wired with these biases. Understanding them doesn't magically erase them, but it does give you the power to spot them in yourself and in the world around you. It lets you see things and maybe even yourself a little more clearly. Thanks for joining us.